Yeah, last night, my son's like, the internet's been really slow, Dad. And so I tried to reset the router using the app, and the app's like, please put in your password. And I'm like, okay, I put it in. It's like, nope, that's not your password. And so it was like, I felt like it was 20 minutes, but my son said it was like 2 hours before I finally got it all like dialed back
You,
in.
you know what your problem was? You planned it like a waterfall. And that's what happened. You thought this is going to take me 2 hours. You didn't. You didn't
No, no.
sprint it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like a waterfall. I was like, oh, this is just
Yeah.
20 minutes. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
No,
It's
no.
two
You
hours.
know, as oh God, what was I thinking? It's TLC. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
That's right.
Yeah. They were onto something.
Yeah.
In that they were ahead of their time.
Super
Who
at
knew?
the time.
Exactly.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe, Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction. Today's episode is sponsored by
Bosch Refine My Site is a cloud-based construction collaboration platform that applies lean principles to enable your entire team to plan, communicate, and execute in real time. It's the digital tool that works in tandem with your last planner system process and puts it all together in one simple, collaborative ecosystem. This easy-to-use platform is available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and can be used on desktops, tablets, and mobile devices. According to Spencer Easton, scheduling manager at Oakland Construction,
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planner system.
here's what our users have to say. We've looked at 3 other digital scheduling platforms and none compare to the straightforward approach Refine My Site takes. From milestone planning all the way down to daily tasks, this program gives every general contractor and their trade partners meaningful collaboration, accountability, and KPIs. Register today to try Refine My Site for free for 60 days.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show.
Welcome to the show, Howard Goldberg. Howard, it is my honor and pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your morning in the lovely East Coast when you're fighting things like snow and clouds, and here I have nothing but sunshine and actually no, it's still darkness because it's so early. But thank you for coming on the show, Howard.
Thank you for having me, Felipe. It's good to be here. Hello out there in Scrum world.
First time scrummer, long time listener.
Yes. Well. Yeah, I don't know how much of a long-time listener. It's more along the lines of like a new member of the tribe.
Yeah.
A new member of the tribe joining and such, and excited to spread the word of the Scrum gospel, to all as best I can. Being that this was the first week I actually implemented my lessons in Scrum format, and it actually worked out well and such. And I'm actually almost ahead of my coworkers in a project that we're doing and such. And I will say to you personally, since I know you also introduced me to the confetti in my Trello board, that is a Felipe special. I have a class who yearns and cheers for the confetti. When I move things over to the done, there's like, yay! So I'm like,
That's awesome.
excellent.
What grades are they, Howard?
They're middle schoolers, 7th graders.
All right.
So they kind of have seen the X little pieces of the board, and in this lesson we actually used a Kanban board in it, and the kids like it. So I'm kind of excited to see how far more it goes. not just on a group project level, but also on a whole class level, where I kind of put a kind of a mini Kanban board up on a wall and post-it notes of everything that there should be doing, and we move to doing, and then done when it is done. Such common sense. It just makes the mind go, no.
Stay hydrated, because time's gonna go. I mean, time's gonna go fast, but I want to see you passing out because you're talking so much. Even though you're a teacher, so you should be used to,
being able to go long times without a drink or going to the restroom. Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of one thing that they did not teach us in education school. Kind of like that, this a skill set, but you kind of learn it as the job goes on.
It's one of those things you learn on the job. It's like you learn how to create some course curriculum, planning for the year, but there's no talk about the biological needs of the human.
Yes, that and the sarcasm. It's almost next level that you just can't. You just have to sometimes stand back and just be in awe. When I was teaching a sixth graders, they had a time where I was passing out a test, and I was going over the instructions and stuff, and I said, if you can't follow these instructions, you will draw my wrath. Just trying to be, simple little, scary adult type thing. So the kids do the test, they handed the papers, and and then one child comes up to me with a picture that he drew of me. Now, I have there were kind of other erasure marks, so I guess that was like other attempts at drawing on the same piece of notebook paper. But it's kind of this very tall, kind of like a monstrous, got the horns out, like fire and brimstone. Kind of gave me a bit of a six pack, so I was kind of a little bit happy in regards to that one. Maybe a little too much extra on the underarm hair, and I was like, "Grr," and he hands it to me, and I go, well, what is this? And it goes, your wrath. And I'm like, what? You drew my wrath.
Oh, good job, kid.
I'm like, I want to say something in response, but I can't, because it was just so good. But that is the team I have to work. That is the team I work with almost sometimes on a daily basis. So anyhow, so that's back to you. That's a serious mode now.
Yeah, back to the show. Please tell the good people of the EBFC show a little bit about yourself.
I am a middle school teacher in Loudoun County, Virginia. It is I have been teaching for 23 years total. This is my 18th year in Loudoun County. I'm originally from Somerset, New Jersey, Exit 9. For all you New Jersey fans out there. I believe it is Exit 9. It's been a while since I've been back in Jersey, so hopefully it's Exit 9. And such. Moved down to Florida, then went to school here in Washington, D.C. at American University. Got my bachelor's in history in 1997. Then went back home to Miami to Florida International University. Got my master's in of Science and Social Studies Education in 1999. Then got a job teaching in Maryland for 5 years, Prince George's County, then Charles County, Maryland. Then I moved in 2004 to the other side of the Potomac in Virginia. Have been here ever since. And been teaching in Loudoun County public schools for the past 18 years. And such. I teach middle school history. I've done everything from as I jokingly like to say to the students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 6th grade is, I like to say, U.S. History Season 1, where we go from exploration up to Robert E. Lee walking into Appomattox Courthouse, and then 7th grade is Robert E. Lee walking out of Appomattox Courthouse up to the present as best as possible, since the present is always changing and such. And then 8th grade is civics, so teaching how the government works or not works, and all that good stuff in between. And I've enjoyed every moment of it and such. And and I wouldn't change anything that I've done, career choices. I love what I do. I work with great people, the kids, the adults, and it's really great what I have. And it is kind of through that mechanism that I kind of got introduced to the world of Scrum. Do not, I got a friend. We'll have to call the engineer on this one. I'm like, okay,
Yeah. He
all right.
fixes things. He's a fixer.
Yes. Yes, yes. Yeah, I believe it was actually I want to say this past October, where I was just, um, I've been struggling. As I said at the beginning, I enjoy teaching. It's just I had been, uh, to kind of, I guess, to use the vernacular, my flow wasn't going very well in regards to into the work that I was doing, and I just felt that I wasn't giving putting the best quality product out there for my students, which is my job, to give the best quality product for the students to learn the content and skills that I'm teaching. And I just felt behind in a lot of things, kind of feeling rushed to get things done, um, and such. Almost kind of taking as a kind of to say a heroic effort to kind of catch up, and not even to get ahead, but to catch up, you know, and such. So she set us two together,
And her genius. And like, for people that
yes,
don't know, like, Eileen's not going to come on the show, but she's not going to come on the show yet. But
yeah.
Eileen she is brilliant at what she does. It's awesome. She works for LCI, just for people wondering, like, how does Felipe know Eileen too? Like, Felipe knows people. Thank you, LCI, for connecting me to such great people like
Yes.
Eileen, who works there. And she said, I think she sent me a note, and she's like, you got to talk to Howard about Scrum.
I'm so proud of her and the work that she has done with LCI, and also proud of the work that LCI does as well.
Yeah,
And
likewise. I'm proudly sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. So, yeah, thank you, Eileen, and thank you, LCI. Why not give a shout out? And people, click on the show notes. There's a link in the show notes about LCI if you want to learn more about the Lean Construction Institute and the beautiful type of work that they do, and putting people like myself and Eileen together, and then tangentially putting Howard together, where we make the magic happen. So, Howard,
oh, good grief.
let's give people a little bit of context and talk about, I think I spent probably 10-ish minutes showing you about the Scrum framework and where to find a little bit more information. And then we practiced in one of my favorite tools, Trello, Trello, which I think you also use as well.
Yes, it is. It is my go-to, pretty much almost for everything and such. But it was more on less on a kind of, I guess, on a personal matter in regards to it. I was just kind of like things were behind and such in regards to that. Things, things, forms that needed to be filled out and turned in for IEPs, for child study reports, getting things graded, in a timely manner.
And Howard, I promised my guests every time we throw out an acronym, we're going to decouple. IEP is, let me take a guess. Let me see if it's an individual education plan.
Correct. Individualized education plan. Yes.
Individualized. All right.
Give yourself a ding on that one.
Okay. I'll take some points on that one.
Yes. Individualized education plans. They are used for when students are diagnosed with learning disabilities, part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to kind of ensure that all students, get taught in the least restrictive environment as possible. And sometimes with teachers, they have to fill out forms indicating what are things that they see going on with the child. Sometimes it's data forms, because sometimes IEPs have goals that they want the students to be working towards. It could be on an academic basis, it could be on a behavior basis. So sometimes this is information needs to be documented and it needs to be submitted from time to time. CSCs are child studies, which is kind of, I guess you would say one or two step lower than an IEP. Um, a child study kind of is almost like the first step to work towards getting towards to an IEP, where teachers of a student may have concerns that they notice, parents from home may notice these things, and they kind of report in and say, like, let's start taking down some observations, some data of what we see, and then let's see if we can implement some supports for the students to kind of help them along, and kind of at a certain time report back with what we see. And then what we may see is that, the child study plan works, so let's continue on with it if we feel it's needed, or maybe it seems that maybe we need to take this to the next step, and then we see if an IEP is needed, and what accommodations after, if an IEP, if as a student is deemed to be eligible for services, then we work out amongst the parents, the students, teachers, other staff, psychologists, and such, what accommodations the student may need to be successful, because that is the whole process to be successful. So I got those decoupled out there.
Perfect. And like a lot of the stuff that Howard's talking about, just in breaking down the student, needs and some of this stuff, Howard, you and I had talked about, we got on the phone a couple of times over the course of I guess you're right, since last October, making your Scrum transformation. Eileen, in her infinite wisdom, thought that you would benefit from learning the Scrum framework that I use every single day. And
oh God, was she right? Yes, and this is being recorded, so you can play this back to her that I said Eileen is right.
Eileen, I'm going to make that the clip from the show. When Howard said Eileen was right, that's going to be the soundbite. For a lot of people, Howard, when they don't know what the Scrum framework is, and awareness, I've got a whole blog post on awareness for Scrum on the EBFCshow.com. So people check that out. Awareness is an issue because some of the things that we do in our everyday, how we work, and most people work in some type of team environment, like even yourself as a teacher, it's a team environment. We talked about the students are on your team. So there's parts and pieces of the framework that, typically people do, but in order for it to be Scrum, you have to close the loop, and there's a couple of extra little nuanced things. And then once you make those small changes, and for people listening, if you're already working on a team, you're close to already threatening to do Scrum. You're threatening, it's close. And so like what Howard was talking about with these kids and just these different reports that they do, these feedback forms that happen on quasi-annual basis. In the Scrum framework, there are a couple key points for feedback. And as Howard knows now, when we put this concept of a time envelope, or we call a time box in Scrum called the sprint, now we've radically changed that feedback frequency, and magical things start to happen. So Howard, I want to let you unpack, tell people a little bit. I mean, you went on and did a great job of saying, where you were before, and you felt like you were behind. And even from my perspective, just in our engagement that first time, I could see frustration was high. I mean, you were very frustrated. You were also like arguably too hard on yourself, because there's a systems component to how people work, Howard, which I don't think a lot of people appreciate. Sometimes people, if you're out there and you're listening to the show and you're feeling like frustrated in the work that you're doing too, some of it's actually not your fault. Some of it is the system that you're in, but you can change the system.
It's kind of self-inflicted wounds that you kind of give to yourself that you don't realize, or such, or for our friends overseas, its own goals that you kind of score against yourself, as well. And you are right. It's kind of a systematic, where I was just kind of like, doing things, just habits that just needed to be changed. like, for example, the concept of multitasking, because every now and then they say teachers are great multitaskers, because of all the things we have to do. And then I'm like realizing, no, sometimes we're bad at it, it's such. And then I kind of started looking at when you introduced me to the concept of kind of putting things in a to do, a doing, and a done, and just making sure that when it's something's in the doing pile, um, you finish it. You don't even think about doing anything else. And I just started doing that on my own, putting things into doing, even though my to do pile was not prioritized, but it was things that I know would probably need to be done at least not every single day, but at least I know in a typical day that most of these things would need to be done. Things like, making sure you're updated on your graded papers, make sure any forms that needed to be filled out were filled out, prep for the lessons for the next day, who are like, parent phone calls that you need to send, that you need to do send home to, everyday things that needed to be done. So I just started putting that in my to-do pile and, moving things over. And I was feeling like, I got them done, things like that. And slowly, in a kind of weird way, I found that I was getting things done ahead of time and having free time to do stuff at the end. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? Ah, and such. And it was working out, on a personal level. For me, I actually found myself getting more relaxed and kind of getting into, here's that word again, the flow of things, where even sometimes I wouldn't move stuff from the to do to doing, but once I started doing something, I made sure I got it done. It's like, if I was grading a set of papers of an assignment, I would make sure I get at least one whole class, done. I teach 6 classes of 7th graders. So at least if I know I'm doing a grading run of papers, I'm just going to be like, I'm going to grade some of these, nope, I'm going to grade them all. All of these assignments are going to graded right now, things like that. Or, I know I have forms that I need to fill out. Okay, which forms do I need to fill out? I'm going to fill those forms out now. Making sure everything is done now when I'm starting to do it. Because I think that's a lot of times, and I'm pretty sure everybody in every profession has felt this, that, when you're working on something, and then like the mind tends to get lost, or you realize you have something else to do. Okay, I'm going to do some of this now. All right, I'll do some of this, and I do some of this. And you just realize you think doing multitasking gets everything done. No, because the pile's still there, and it sometimes stares at you in like, almost in judgment, this inanimate, pile of objects, of things that need to get done. And I just found I was getting things done, on a personal level. And then on a personal level, I kind of wanted to, well, wait a minute, this is me personally doing stuff. Can I implement this, on a kind of teaching, kind of in lesson planning, and such, kind of taking the ideas of the last planner system and ideas of Scrum and such, because it was also, and I have to give also a shout out to Mr. Christian Backel, who also helped out a lot, because he was kind of the one that kind of got me just hooked on the idea. Lesson planning is hard. It is the joy of teaching. It is also sometimes the bane of my existence, because of just everything that has to be done in regards to it. Because even though I am teaching a similar subject across 6 classes, so I guess break it down to the fact I have 6 teams, and each teams have their own qualities and characteristics. So the line from A to B is not going to be going the same way. So kind of factoring that in, just kind of getting that like thought process through. So I kept hearing about this, so I talked with Mr. Piquel about this, and I was kind of interested. But then, for unforeseen circumstances, it kind of went away and such. And I kind of brought it back again a few weeks, because I was just like, because I was just struggling with planning, because teachers, we were doing the waterfall method. We were like saying by this day, we'll have this done, and it just usually, the calendar just goes horribly wrong within a matter of a few days. And the thing is, though, it's not, once again, like you said at the beginning, it's not my fault that the calendar goes off. There are just so many variables that you're dealing with. And being that you're dealing with a team of 6 classes of 150 kids, so we're talking roughly 25-ish, kids per class. So you're talking about a team of 20, 26 or more, because I'm part of the team as well. And I was just finding out, so over a few weeks of conferencing, myself and Mr. Piquel kind of started to put the pieces together. And I was realizing, as you also said at the beginning, I was kind of doing Scrum, but I was just not I was doing bits and pieces or not in the right order. But I knew, hearing from him, hearing from you, and, all the things that Eileen would send towards me, reading and such, and hearing what Dan Fauché would say, as I met Mr. Fauché as well, and he's a wonderful man.
He's also been on the show.
Yes,
he was a great guest on the show as well. Shout out to Mr. Dan Fauché.
Yes, and just hearing all the things I go through, I'm like, because I guess I and I think also, who else was I talked to? Mr. Pease, James Pease.
Man, you're just talking to all my friends. Here's what you're doing, Howard.
Yes. Yes. So, hello out there to you, if you are listening. But as we were going through, this has got to work for me. And I guess I was too black and white in it, because I was in construction. This is construction, because that's how all I heard about with Scrum and Lean, in the concept of construction, and building. And then, Piquel comes around, I hear planner. I'm like, this could work. So, and then I kind of decided to let's dive in and let's kind of see, where I can make these square pegs fit into the square holes and the round pegs into the round holes. I wanted to take a look at it, kind of almost take a 30,000-foot view of it, so I could connect the dots. And as I was going through it, and then I kind of followed up with you in regards as how it works, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this all wrong, and I could have been doing it all right and differently. And I have kind of been kicking myself for that. But then I looked at it, and I found, as I was also learning from what you said and what Piquel said, and he also gave me an introduction to, I guess, almost kind of the Scrum Holy Grail of the art of doing twice the work in half the time, by the great Dr. Jeff Sutherland.
See all those post notes in there. That's how my book looked when I first met Jeff, and I had him autograph it. He was just like, well, Jeff said to me, he's like, oh, you really like post-it notes? I was like, I do, Jeff. I do. I like them a lot.
To any of you who are just, I would recommend it, because it is so clear and so concise, and he walks you through every part of the process with clear examples of his experience of going through the different aspects of it. Like, I just finished the chapter on waiting, and how you prioritize things, and how, prioritizing on how long it's, and when you can get it done is just it's out the window. In fact, when I start planning out this next unit, I'm going Fibonacci, sequence on it. Because I'm like, oh my God, it so makes sense. Because as I would go through and I would kind of think about, okay, this skill needs kind of this skill is a 1, because I could realize, things that I probably spent too longer on in regards to teaching was absolute waste. Not because what I did was bad, it's just that I could have done it faster and more efficient than the way I did it. And I think also that's another thing, being hard on myself, it's more like I want to do the best that I can. And I don't like settling for, doing things, shortchanged. And then I realized that sometimes as you're planning, and you realize when you plan by the calendar, this date's got to have this done, and that time constraint just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, you may have to rush things, cut corners and such. And as I said at the beginning, develop not a quality product, that you feel. But now I feel like I do kind of had been doing some Scrum stuff here and there and such, and kind of getting through things quicker. And I think doing a better job at developing, a higher quality product, because knowing, okay, the kids need A, B, and C. How do I get to A, B, and C? Not really, oh, I have to do this. Well, no, because that's not going to help you get to A, B, and C. But if, but you've done this all the time. I'm like, well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help in getting to, to where the goals I needed. And then also kind of on the examples of, and a lot of it reading through his book, also, I guess, reconfirmed that things that I had been doing were actually worthwhile, kind of like in the concept of stories, kind of knowing what being able to define done. And Teddy teaches a lot of this is stuff we do already, or we should be doing, in regards to developing good assessments, good teaching, and such. Kind of like if, to quote the phrase, with teaching, the acronyms usually, or the phrasing is usually formatives, summatives. Summatives are, the tests at the end, the dreaded chapter test, or the dreaded final project that, everyone had to do to assume that, the content was learned, the things everybody dreaded having, walking in, realizing, oh God, we have a test today, and freaking out. Formatives are the tools to ensure that they got it, that they have mastered, that they have understanding of the concepts. And I was going through, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Formatives are almost kind of like, the definition of done. It's kind of like if if you're kind of doing things on a sprint, those could be those moments where, you test, okay, the formative should be part of the, final product. Basically, the summative should not be a surprise. By the time, if formatives are done right, by the time they get to summatives, there should be no shocks or no surprises. And if there is, then that's something you as the teacher should look at, because your product is faulty in some way. Maybe, well, they understood the content. Maybe it was the skills that were as part of the summative that they needed to do to show that they understood the content they were not ready for. So that should then, hopefully next time you kind of realize, okay, not only do I need to check for understanding of the content, I need to check for understanding of the skills, because sometimes you have to realize that if a test kind of bombs at the end, you have to double check to make sure, was it because they didn't know the content, or that they did not understand the skills? Now, the traditional chapter test, which does have some of its value because you want them to make sure they get the content, are usually like, your multiple choice, fill in the blank, some true, false, depending upon what you have, maybe some writing of and such. But then depending upon how much skills you put into the summative at the end, how much is there a writing to persuade, writing to perform, to inform, to critique. Just different styles of writing require different skill sets. So if they don't know how to do that type of writing, or writing in general, it's depending on the grade level that you teach or the skill level of your students that you may have, you're setting up for disaster at the end. So good formatives inform good teaching, and those are kind of like your story. Those should kind of be like the almost the story, the kind of the coda of each story, kind of each chapter, and such. Yes, I got to the story section of Jeff's book, if you couldn't tell.
But Howard, I want to just go back and unpack a little bit. When we first connected, and I tell people, like, you start doing Scrum iteratively, exactly like it is. It's like, it's not flipping a light switch. Like one day you were doing your old thing, and then we flip a switch after you learn what Scrum is, and now you're doing full Scrum. For most people, it's not a light switch. It's a small series of steps. And so like when you and I got together, right, it was the biggest thing that was hindering your ability to get into that flow state was all of that multitasking, which you hit on so lovely. And then we changed your pattern slightly, super tiny little change, so that you can into a habit of one piece flow as best as possible, adapted for your situation.
Mhm.
And then everything you just said now, the type of conversation we're having today, night and day, compared to how we talked in October, which was it by this point, like 2 quarters ago, to use
Yeah.
teacher. It was like a semester ago when we talked
Yes.
about when we started. And I think right now, the people listening that haven't been on all of the conversations that we've had together, Howard,
Mhm.
it's amazing to hear you talking about how you're now working on the teaching instead of just being in the teaching. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that Scrum does, is that in the framework, when you do the full system, which Howard is now absolutely doing, you
Mhm.
have a chance to improve how you work in addition to what you deliver at the end. So I just wanted to just pause on that, because you're making my heart sing. Thank you, Howard.
Aw, you're welcome, Felipe. I would say a light switch was, but I think it's a bunch of switches. I think it was more along the
That's what I'm
lines
saying.
of,
It's a bunch of switches. And some people
yeah.
hear this, Howard, and like I could explain Scrum in less than 120 seconds. I can
Mhm.
pull up a picture, and I've done this many times, and I show people all this stuff, and the people are like, okay. And then I say, okay, now I've showed you everything that's there.
Mhm.
Let's unpack some of this. It has to be unpacked with your current way of doing stuff.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the conversation I had with Christian in regards to that. We kind of I took his expertise and your expertise.
Did you know that
And,
Christian's also a Scrum Master, Howard?
uh, I did not. I know now.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm almost like I almost want to become one now. Just because
Yeah.
because if for no other reason, you just hear I hear a lot of my colleagues, not just in, Bill, but I'm sure where if you look online, it's just a lot of just struggling, just kind of struggling with just like gets her because I mean these past few years, teaching has been very hard, especially if you had to do it, virtually like I did. And teaching is just a struggle in particular. Forget doing it during a pandemic. It's just a hard job. And people kind of like, joke on us, kind of, mock us, well, you get the summers off. I'm like, well, not really. Some of it is, some of it is, a lot of it is like, we kind of, yes, we do unwind because dealing with those kids, dealing with kids is a hard task just to begin with. And we don't really have time for ourselves. So the summertime sometimes is that time for ourselves to rest, to recover, to kind of take professional development courses to kind of boost, our knowledge base or to get recertified and such. And depending upon, thankfully, I work in a county where our pay is very well in regards to it. But some places, people need to kind of work a summer job, to kind of make ends meet, which is a wholly other complete discussion whatsoever.
The sheer numbers of students that you have, it's so, I mean, to put in context, you're helping transform, in essence, helping people grow and develop 150 people in
Hmm.
12 months, right? So for a lot of people, like even in large complex construction projects, Howard,
Hmm.
like people don't have that number of people that they're actively engaged with. I mean, you are actively engaged one to many and one
Yeah.
on one in a lot of cases. And in construction, even though like the project teams can get, there on the mega projects, it's not until you get to the mega projects north of $500 million
Mm.
that the teams get to sizes of consistently over 100.
And you also have to realize in regards to those teams, and I tell everybody, especially new teachers, when you're dealing with students, I think of almost kind of a 70-20-10 ratio, where as much as you may not think it, roughly 70 to 80% of the students, give or take in that area, will do what you want them to do because they're just good kids. Even the ones that you may not think, are good kids because they want to do well. Granted, you may have to ask them a few times. You may have to kind of, kicking, screaming as like everything else and such. Then there are roughly at the end 5 to 10% that need services or assistance that is beyond my control, is beyond the school's control, for multitude of reasons. And in some instances, they don't want to be in the building, and they will clearly make you let you know that they don't want to be in the building in so many words. and such. And then you have that 10 to 20 in the middle who, I guess you would categorize, to use the vernacular, the at-risk students, those that are kind of on that edge of, where we need to kind of at risk of falling into kind of that range of, they can either go up and kind of be those kids that, will do stuff, or kind of fall into the trap where they need those services that, some public schools cannot provide for them. I'm dealing with 150 kids with about maybe 15-ish to 20 who really don't want to be there. It's not like, a construction project where, like, if you're not there, you don't get paid. So it's like, you're there because you kind of want to be there. So we're dealing with a lot of things handling, and a lot of things that are kind of, I don't know if out of my control is the right word, but things that I may not be aware of, or yeah, I guess I could say out of my control, and such, because they come with a lot of baggage, to that, the good, the bad, and unfortunately the ugly. And you always have to remember the school is sometimes the safest place for them, and such. So I'm dealing with a lot of different characteristics of my team on a daily basis, and you just have to be kind of aware of that. Using kind of Scrum, though, when I kind of like look at it now, I kind of, because I've got my Trello board off to the side that I kind of have, and I kind of now, I thought I would start kind of with Chris, kind of do kind of my planning one time with the Trello board, just like one big board, and kind of go at it. But then I kind of realized I can't really, because I have 6 different teams. I have 6 different teams, and they need to be planned accordingly. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's jump in. Let's go in full breach. Kind of like, all into the deep end and stuff. And I'm finding it actually is kind of easy. It's the flow is just it's just so working, and such. And like I said, kind of looking at it with a lot of help from you and Pikel, kind of taking that 30,000-foot view of it, and then kind of seeing like, oh, okay, this is where this part fits. Oh, okay, this is where this part fits. I think I think when we started talking, I needed to see it first. I mean, I know we talked about, yes, there is the theoretical aspect of it, and and it's got its valid points, but then you got to see how does it fit for you, and such. And even then, I kind of was asking questions of myself about, because I was kind of always thinking on that personal level, how when I put one thing in the doing pile, that's the only thing you're doing, and such. That's on a personal level. But then, like when you're doing on a school level, you could have multiple things in progress doing pile, because while at one point you may have like your lesson that you're doing on that day, you can also have like a semester or a quarter wide project going on at the same time. So that should also be in the kind of the doing pile, because it is still in progress. And I guess I also kind of was still systematic in my thinking in regards to the sprint, where it's like, oh, I had these parts in sprint. Oh, what if I still have parts in the sprint and I'm getting to the end of my sprint? And you kind of in a very nonchalant way, it's like, Howard, are you going to stop teaching those things at the end of the unit? I'm like, duh, Howard, that was a dumb question. But it was just like, it's just one of those things where it's just like, how to see how it fits, and then just really, yeah, this works.
Oh, we had a great call, Howard, where you were
Yes.
arguably way too hard on yourself, and you had a bunch of questions for me, and we just went through real quick on the phone, and it was
for the listeners. It was a whole bunch of post-it notes too, and I kind of had like put them out like on a board. It's like, okay, it was like I literally on my desk put them almost in asking to ask answered, kind of pile. It's like that's how like ingrained I got. So it's like, and it was to the point. It's like, and you started out at the beginning. So before I even started asking the questions, you were like, okay, I could move these 4, skip the ask, they're answered. Part's done.
One of the cool things that came out of that is when we're talking about the team, and the conversation we had this last time was different than the first time, because the first time you weren't doing Scrum yet. And then now you've had a semester's worth of practice with it, and so you're so much deeper into the framework. And we expanded the definition on this last call on who is the team and what is the product.
And that was I think as soon as that got answered, that was okay. I'm good. I'm good, because I was reading Jeff's book, And he was talking a lot of the concept of teams, teams, teams and teams,
Yeah.
working with others. And granted, in a middle school, you have, depending upon where you work, you teachers work in teams. Some places it's called CLTs, common learning teams, content learning teams. Sometimes some places will call it PLCs, professional learning communities. Basically, it's where similar content teachers get together to plan out their subject matter. So I was kind of thinking, okay, I probably could do the CLT wise. What about me? I mean, because I see the principles in it. I saw the principles in it on my own and personal on my daily board that I do. Can I do this, lesson planning? And I was kind of like, okay, I'm working with teams. Then I was kind of like, okay, wait a minute, I'm kind of the only one, on that team of teaching my kids. Can I really do this? Who else would I be talking to? And then you kind of came and said, Howard, you are the project owner, you are the scrum master, you are everything on the team. I'm like, I am, and you talked me through it, and I was like, oh, it makes sense now. Yay! Boom, we're gone. We're off and running. And I tried it this week, and I would just be amazed that I would put in the aspects of I kind of set my board up for my classes where I have now my yearly backlog, which is, and a lot of this was in consultation with Mr. Piquel. I have my yearly backlog, which is what my year is going to be, the content I'm going to teach for the year. That's like the year. So that's like sprint one, kind of like the yearly sprint. So that by the end of the school year, I should get through all of this.
Right.
Okay. Then I break it down into the active quarter because then I move the stuff over that I need to do for this quarter, which should take 9 weeks. And then you kind of put in a current sprint backlog. This is kind of what I would like to do for in these 3 weeks. And then I have in progress, and I kind of break everything down. If you're familiar with Trello, use the checklist feature to kind of go through and these are all the things that I'm going to try and do, for this unit. So at the end, I could be like, aha, done. They should be able to deliver the assessments that would show at the end that they have understanding of the content, that they have understanding of the skills. And I just started out where I would just move certain things I thought I could get through in that block into the in progress. And as I was going through it, with the exception of a few classes, because a few classes got a little middle schoolers decided to be like middle schoolers that day, which does happen from time to time.
Variation is normal in any system.
It is. Yes. And I found as I was moving things over to the done, I was like, oh, I was moving everything over. I was getting done. Granted, things at the end were then developed into the homework that they needed to do at home. But I felt that was, we had set them up for a success so that they, if they decided to do the homework, that they would be able to be successful at it. One of the things I'm sometimes I'm not as much in control as I would like to be, but I can if, when needed. Oh, wow. I'm moving stuff over, and the flow was working. And this was before I got further into the book, where I got into the concept of, before I got to the concept of using Fibonacci or planning poker to, plan out a unit and such, or concept of the stories, making sure each story was invest quality, kind of like being able to kind of see, did they have done, did one and such, and and I'm gonna need probably read that to make sure I understand the stories, because I would also say to teachers sometimes the story part might be hard to handle for some math teachers in particular.
I got this metaphor from somebody I was working with this week, Howard.
Mm-hmm.
They said you can think about stories like different containers or cups,
Mm-hmm.
and they use the word vessel because they were way into ship metaphors or whatever. And so Howard's got his cup and I've got my cup, and his cup is probably twice the size of my cup, which is cool. So he's got a bigger cup. So some stories are bigger, but it's still just a container that groups similar work together. There are definitely resources out there. I highly recommend Jeff's Red Book. The art of doing twice the work in half the time. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. I've read that book probably 6 to 8 times a year. since it first came out.
It's almost like my Torah, it's like, it's like, I'm Jewish, so, it's like, it's something that I was saying to a colleague of mine, I wish I would have read this book earlier, and stuff like that. But now that I have read it, I realize I am not going to now make the same mistakes that I've made in the past. I now know what to do better and to improve on it. And
the thing to highlight, Howard, is that when we first connected and before you're getting help from me and Christian, is like, number one, it takes courage to even get help. So I want to just thank you for being courageous. A lot of people don't think about that, but to do something different and to reach out, especially you're reaching out to people across industry. Like Christian and I are typically, all of our experiences have been in the construction industry, and you're in education. And so we're crossing industry boundaries, which I think is fantastic. And that's where, when I started getting into continuous improvement, I had to cross industry boundaries into other industries like software, manufacturing. I was never would have come across Scrum and then just to come back to lean construction, which is in and of itself its own thing, which is like all up in your house with
literally and figuratively.
So once you took that first step, which is a big step for people listening, like I'm thinking like, how do I be like Howard?
Well, it's more, it also depends upon, I guess, how you view yourself. I always I never settled for being where I was. I always, how can I do this better? Because you have to, because things change over time. The education industry, a field, has changed over time. I joke with the kids, I started teaching when you had transparencies, had the transparency, projector and such. And
remember that.
Yes, and now things are like more digital, and you have to realize, as much as you joke about it, the kids I have have a lot more access to information than the kids I started teaching, 23 years ago. A lot more. They know more, they're exposed to more information, which has its good points and its bad points. Their level of technology usage is more impressive of what they know how to do. And you can't even take, if you work at a school, because now cell phones are more affordable, in such with internet capabilities, you have to think about that now, that even if you work in a school with a lot of disadvantaged students that you may not think have that access, they actually do in some instances. So you can't just figure that out, kind of like leave that out of the equation. So I always knew I had to improve. You have to either adapt, or as the saying goes, adapt or die. In that case.
Yeah, that's a
joke. But it's so true. It is so true. What ways could I adapt? How I could change a lesson this way? New ideas to kind of come through. And we were always getting over define the stuff that you have to do. Everyone says everyone says now everything's supposed to be more data driven. And everyone's like, oh, data, it's all about data. But it's like, take the step back and realize, well, you kind of should always have been data should have been driving, because how the kids are doing in certain things, that is the data. So a lot of it is, I would just say to teachers who kind of are thinking, should I do this? Can I do that? Just pause, step back, and kind of look at how you do things, and then kind of see how things fit, and kind of see how it works in your system. And that's kind of what I was doing all the time. But yet planning always kind of seemed to be that, Grail was like getting to was like giving my best in that regard to delivering a final product, was like cutting corners, and just realizing how I was planning with kind of, the Gantt charts or the waterfall method and stuff like that. You could tell I've read the book, haven't you? Yes. I was fearful that you would give me a test, at the end of the show.
There's going to be no test.
Thank you. Please, thank you. But it was just
we're in the formative.
Yeah, there you go. Give yourself exactly.
Thank you.
Give yourself
Yeah.
that one. But no, as I was reading Jeff's book, I would read it and I would put things down. And I was like, and I would find myself laughing because it's like, oh my God, it's so right. In regards, we stink at planning. We stink like we can never estimate how long something takes, because they're just, especially when you're a teacher, you're dealing with so many variables, and those variables have to be honored and respected. Because if those variables aren't honored and respected, you are once again setting yourself up for a disaster. Thankfully, I work in a school district in a school where those variables are honored and those are respected. And I know sometimes teachers may say, well, I've got one that says we have to do a common assessment where everybody, common assessment, basically imagine that if like, since I'm a 7th grade history teacher, if I work with 2 other history teachers in 7th grade. So basically the tests that we do have to be similar. Basically a kid who gets an A in my class should be getting an A in the other teacher's classes. It's kind of to go away from the old adage of like, who's, oh, you're the easy grader, you're the hard grader, kind of like who's the easy 7th grade teacher. But that still can work because if you plan it out right, you've got the common assessment at the end. That's the final product. And as long as, if everybody is on board with it, you kind of know where you get. It's like, and it's kind of like reading through Jeff's book about all the products that you kind of want. I think it was Medco
Yeah.
in it, and kind of like they knew the product at the end. And all these companies, the product at the end, what you want it to do, what functions you want it to have. And that's kind of like the same way as a test. The skills that are needed, the content that should be understood. And then you just kind of work backwards. That's kind of what we call backward design. You kind of plan, plan with the assessment in mind and work your way backwards. So I was like, once again, that kind of also got me into Scrum because I heard about like pull planning, and such like that. So I was like, okay, these people are speaking my language, and such. So just once again, how's it fit? So you pull back, accordingly. You realize like if you teach a class of EL English learners, students who do let English as a second language to them. So depending upon their skill levels, maybe a part where something is where for one class it might be a 3, another it might be, for that class it might be an 8, not be, but for legitimate reasons. And as long as those reasons are honored, Scrum should work for teachers. And that's what helped me, I think, feel like I'm going to be a better teacher, just learning that, I could see how the dots all connect.
You also jumped into Jeff's book, and at the end there's a chapter on Scrum and Education, and Willie Wygans, who Jeff has met.
Who I've met. I've met too.
We got to talk about Willie for a second, but
yes.
People at the back of Jeff's book, there's a couple of chapters on Scrum and other industries, which it was fascinating. There wasn't one in construction at the time, and it still isn't yet. There's been more work done on construction Scrum, Howard, pun intended.
Yes.
But,
very much. I kind of have an inside look at that on, so we won't go down that route. So
tell people about meeting Willie and what Willie does.
Well, Mr. Weilands, I believe, teaches chemistry
Yes.
in the Netherlands, and he's developed a concept. And I've only met him on 2 occasions, and I need to kind of email. So, Mr. Weilands, if you're listening, and such, I will be in contact with you soon for over the summer. Kind of came up with a concept of Edu-Scrum, where it's kind of taking these Scrum principles and putting it into education. Kind of mixing out, and I kind of was interested and kind of saw what it was. And it kind of got me hooked. Now I tried a project once. I tried to go full in. I'm hard on myself because I need to see everything. I am not the type who has to like, dip your toe in once and then kind of see how it works and then kind of move the other. I have to see how the whole thing flows, So I think that's also what kind of attracted me also to Scrum, kind of like, it's a process. So I kind of have to see the whole process. And he kind of shows how he uses Scrum in his teachings. And like with the class doing kind of how they know what they're doing in their projects, know what they're doing in assignments, even kind of working on their own versions of how they show that they are done. that they have understanding of their concept. Now, granted, I probably could not start that out right now because it takes a lot of front end training to do at the front end of the school year. And that's kind of also how a project of mine kind of, when I tried to like dive in, because I thought, oh, this is great, let me try this. And it just blew up in my face. And I kind of realized why it blew up in my face, and, replanned and kind of went back, and kind of redid the unit. I didn't do it with Scrum, but I know what I did wrong. So I know I am not going to do that same mistake again.
That's a plus. Here, you get point for you for learning.
Thank you. Thank you. But you kind of go through Edgy Scrum, and I know someone say that, oh God, is this like a new concept? I'm like, no, it really isn't, because the movement in education now is towards what's referred to now as personalized learning, where kids kind of learn more, independently, and you are more of a, not the lecturer, but more of kind of like the coach. Think of it as more like a Sherpa, the guides through the mountains. That's kind of where the role of a teaching is moving towards. And also the idea of project-based learning, that we're moving away from kind of the traditional tests to more ways where it's like they could take their knowledge and apply it to a certain situation, because those are kind of the skill sets that industries are looking for. So we in education kind of have to prepare them for those skill sets. So there are a lot of pieces out there already where Scrum is good and it can work for you, and where you can kind of fit your pieces in, where you're not really throwing all control over to the kids, which you shouldn't do at the beginning because they have no idea what they're doing, and such. But that's because you're introducing something to them, a new concept, so they've got to have to kind of teach it. So there'll be a lot of groundwork at the beginning, but seeing what Willie and his group have done, Mr. Wylands, and I'm like, oh, this works. This works. And I'm seeing how I can do it, not just in a, when I do individual group projects. I kind of realize now, whatever classroom I'm in, wherever it may be, I'm going to have a Kanban board set up on the wall. So like, even when we're doing like a group activity, we're doing like a whole class activity, recently I had a class, we were working on the 1920s, kind of learning concepts about the 1920s, the Jazz Age, the Harlem Renaissance. I kind of would have the kids, we were doing kind of a choice board activity where when they say a choice board, it's exactly as it sounds, where you have kind of a general topic and you kind of give the students options to kind of get to understanding the knowledge or the content of that topic. So I told the kids, okay, well, the first thing we have, picture like a multi-slide Google slide presentation, where one slide is the Harlem Renaissance, one slide is the Great Migration, one slide is the Jazz Age, and within each of those slides there are five subtopics. So what I had the kids do is I would tell them, okay, this is what you're going to do by the end of class. Taking the class period as my sprint, I would like you to get through at least 2 slides of your choice, one topic in each. Had the kids write their names, write down, pick 2 slides, one topic each inside on the Post-it. All right, put it up to the wall. Okay, and then I went through and I explained what that actually physically means, kind of saying, here are the slides. You can see how they have the topics. I would like you to do 2 of these slides with one topic within each. Does everybody understand what we're doing? We're good? I then walked over, moved everybody's over to doing, and you start working. And lo and behold, the kids are doing it. And you can see when they would come up to me and like show that it's like, okay, go find yours, move it to done. They're like, yes. And they moved it to done.
Yes.
That's like, and as I was individually, I was doing it also with a group project, and the kids loved it because they were saying, kids are saying, it keeps everybody on task. And I think teachers will also love this, using a Kanban board. If anything else, you don't take away from our discussion that went off on so many different tangents and such. Every teacher doing a group project should research about a Kanban board. That is like, if I took nothing else out of learning a Scrum, I have found the joys of a Kanban board. Me and a Kanban board are like my best friends, because for teachers and those who are listening who may not be familiar with the Kanban board, you have, I basically made it very simple: to do, doing, done, where the groups, assign everybody the tasks, they put it in the to do. And then once everybody understands their tasks, once everybody understands what needs to be done, you start doing it. And what's great is, especially and school teachers understand this, when you're working on group projects, there's always that one who wants to, hide under the radar, the one who always wants to hopefully, like, kind of be the anchor, kind of let the others in the group do do the work for them. But you see, with the Kanban board, as I tell the kids, they can't hide. It's out there. And the kids picked it up. If you have a good group, and I've been lucky, knock wood, to have a good group of kids, well, they will enforce on each other. They either help you out, or they will go to the teacher and be like, so-and-so's not doing their work. Why? They're still in the doing pile.
Yeah.
But it's because it's a visual, and it's quick, and it's easy. It's not like forms where, and some teachers have like forms where the kids feel, okay, what are the tasks you're doing? And kind of like write out checkbox. No, write it on a Post-it note. Boom, to do. All right, this is what you're supposed to do. Does everybody understand? We're good. Everybody over to doing. And and I'm just like, I realized once again, I wish I would read this earlier, because I would have started training earlier, and I think life would be so much more easier. Granted, it's become easier from our first visit with kind of like getting everything else, because like we just had interims, and I'm like where I am supposed to be with grading. I don't have a lot of papers to grade over the weekend, because I've been using my Scrum board and getting them through. As crazy as this may sound, I am almost wanting it to be next school year, because I just want to, like, put this through and just be like, but I'm excited for it, because I just want to try new things and see how, like, new ideas work. And I'm just like looking at this, and I'm like, oh my God, I am like drooling over the possibilities of how this works. And I'm going to make sure I take like careful notes of what I do, so I can report back to you and Mr. Backel.
Yeah. I love to hear that you're not really having to work on the weekends anymore. Like, you can get your schoolwork and teaching work done during the 5-day work period, which was not the case a semester ago, right?
Oh no, let's just say I was doing it. I guess if I want to say to anybody who's thinking of kind of like, when you're going to Scrum, did I reinvent the wheel? No. I just found out how to make the wheel spin faster.
And we'll do ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get your hands dirty with learning what Scrum is, I just so happen to have a free Scrum course. If you click in the show notes below, there's a bio link for me. Click on my bio link, and there's a link to a free Scrum course. So go there, and it's only 30 minutes. Invest 30 minutes, but you will get hands-on, get your hands dirty with Scrum and a digital whiteboard. And that's all available for you if you're listening. But Howard, it has been my honor and my pleasure having you on the show. You get the last phrases out, and then we say goodbye to the good people of the EBFC show.
For anyone who's interested also in doing Scrum, if you look at Trello, and Trello's various, but I know if like Trello is like so overwhelming with all of its bells and whistles, it's just a lot of schools on Google use like a Jamboard.
Mm-hmm.
You could set up a Kanban board that way, and in regards to that, and it's very quick and it's very easy. I had people from our central office visiting our school. I think it was this past Thursday, and they came to my class, and they saw the Kanban boards, and they were like, whoa, this is impressive. I'm like, I still. And so they were very impressed with like the productivity, the collaboration that was going on. And one kind of said, I use these. We have a lot of projects going on. I'm like, this comes from the concept of Scrum. So hopefully I'm starting to spread the word around.
There you go.
But I would highly recommend to any of you to click on that link below to take that 30-minute Scrum course. If for no other reason, you get to meet the engineer, in itself, who just, it's a joy. It's always a joy to talk to you, Felipe. And I would highly recommend taking this course or reading about Dr. Sutherland's book about Scrum, and you will be so glad you did. And you will actually feel better at the work that you do, and also just in physically as a person, just because you are doing better, you're doing it in less time, and then you're having that odd sensation of personal time for yourself that you have no idea of what to do now. Just don't tell your significant other, because he or she might add more onto your like honeydew list, and things like that. But no, I hope I was helpful to you and your listeners, Felipe, and it's always a joy and a pleasure to speak with the engineer.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.